On PM Express tonight, it's 24 hours since we were confronted with another reality. Tonight on the show, the hard truth about a dying team we used to love. Where are we? It's been 37 years, and I'm sure you've heard this repeated in the last few weeks many times. 37 years since we last won the Africa Cup of Nations. So there was confidence when we're going into this particular one. And many thought, well, this year was going to be the year. In fact, the president was that confident that when he met the Black Stars just before they left for Egypt, he was clear that this year was going to be the year of return for the Black Stars. The year of return means the year we return to winning ways and win the cup. But you see, before we went to Egypt, there were many issues that confronted us, that maybe gave us warning signals, that maybe we ignored and still somehow thought this was going to be our year. We remember the captaincy row between the Samajan and Dede. How did that play in what we now have seen to be a disaster? Remember the controversy over the appearance fee that we also heard about. And then the rumors about the $80,000 appearance fee that was given to them, that still date has still not been debunked. And so you take it as if that is indeed what happened. And all these issues played out in the background, and the boys still went to Egypt. Ghana played the first game. We drew in a game many thought we should win against Benin. Then secondly, we had another draw against defending champions Cameroon. Many said, well, listen, the defending champions, we played better in this game, and Ghana typically were growing into the tournament. And so we came up against the team from Guinea-Bissau, and we beat them. And then many people thought, here it is, the Black Stars have finally turned the corner. They've done what they always do in tournaments. They start slowly, and then finally they hit momentum and they get to the finals. Well, just yesterday, disaster struck. We lost against a team, again many thought we should beat, which is Tunisia. Okay, and so tonight we are left asking ourselves several questions. When are we going to have the next chance to prove that we can win this and break the jinx? We have to wait 2 more years. And that is provided we even qualify for it, because it's a big if with the current crop of players that we have. We need to ask ourselves an obvious complex question, because there are many complex issues that have accounted for where we are today. The big question that we need to be asking is, and we need to confront this, the hard truth about this dying team that we used to love. What is this hard truth? We need to be confronting these hard truths if we are to make it to the next tournament and win it. That's what we're going to be confronting tonight. Stay with us here on PM Express. And you are live on PM Express tonight. Well, it's 24 hours since that defeat. In fact, yesterday by this time, we were watching the penalty shootout and hoping that a miracle will happen. Remember that we did not really score in the open play. We didn't score at all because that goal was an own goal. And so it tells the story of Ghana. We've been limping through the tournament, and many people saw it coming. So tonight, the big question, we are back to analyzing Black Stars again, but there is a bigger picture. Is there something there that we haven't confronted over the last 37 years? Why we keep repeating and making the mistakes that we've made over the last years? And if you watch the way we entered into this tournament, there were fundamental issues that were repeating themselves. Appearance fees came up, fight over the armband. I mean, people thought, we've overcome it because the president intervened. And we seem to forget that. The president had to intervene to have that addressed. And so it turned out, again, that we're disappointed. So tonight we'll look at that. We'll look at the hard truth about this dying team that we used to love. The Black Stars, many people have stopped loving them. Why? And how do we restore the love? My guest in the studio, Sammy Bartels, is lawyer and sports journalist. Also joining me is former editor of the Kotoko Express newspaper, Jerome Autry. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time here on PM. Thank you. I mean, let me start with you. I mean, yesterday, by this time, as I said, the game was underway, and the Stars were were playing the shootouts. But going into the tournament, I mean, a lot has been said already today about the game, etc. It's been analyzed. We all know what happened. But going into the tournament, the warning signs were there, weren't they?
Yeah, they were. They were starting from the fact that we didn't have the strongest team going into this tournament. I keep saying that this is a team in transition where we're trying to usher out some players who had been part of the team for a very long time and bring through some much younger players. So I think the problem was how we set up this team essentially to fail, because they were not as good as we're touting them to be. And we thought that money will answer all things. So you throw money at them, as we've done in some time past, and then everything changes. And suddenly you could pick an average team and then win an expanded format Nations Cup, 24 teams, which meant you had to play an extra game. And everybody thought, well, we get to the semi-final at a canter, so we'll just get to the semi-final and then roll over the line. But I think it all just goes to show you how farcical our thinking was. Unfortunately, it was at a time where people were beginning to warm up to the team. And I think the presidential endorsement didn't make anything easier for anybody. Once the president came in, promised them everything they wanted, I think it cranked up the pressure. And this team wasn't ready for that.
Jerome?
Yeah, I agree with him to a large extent. I mean, especially when he made a point about raising expectations and knowing very well that the strength of our team wasn't up there. It was even difficult for some of us to really talk about the team, because then you'll be seen as unpatriotic, you'll be seen as being too pessimistic instead of having, I mean, hope and the confidence that things will go well. But clearly, if you check the strength of the Black Stars against some of the teams at the competition, we all knew that we're not up there. And after the first game, for instance, against Benin, I lowered my expectations, because I could then tell that this is a team that will struggle to score. And like he said, for a competition that you have to play 3 group matches, play the round of 16 before you get to the quarterfinal, we should have known that it was always going to be very difficult for us to even get to the quarters and think of the semis and then the cup.
Okay, so let's, Bartels, what were the fundamentals that we didn't get right this time? I mean, because all over the 37 years, many factors have been pointed at. What were the unique factors this time that made it impossible for us to break the jinx?
Again, the first thing I mentioned is the stage of the development of the team. When Kwesi Appiah took over, he decided to rebuild the team, and he went around and picked a lot of players. Unfortunately for us, we are at a point of the evolution of our football where, unlike a certain time, we don't have consistent top-level players. So there was a time when you could call on a midfield who were playing for top teams in Europe and played week in, week out, and were at the pinnacle of their game. This was not the case. Some of the better players in the team, or people we considered as key players, were not playing high level. I mean, in defense, Jonathan is playing in the US, not to demean them, but that's not the highest level of football. John Boy is just coming up with his team, right? And then you have 2 young chaps who are playing, one on the right, lower division. Rahman didn't start, there was Lumo. But then Rahman comes in. Again, Rahman has not had the most successful of careers, although he's had his opportunities. And then you look at midfield, perhaps overall, our top 2 players in terms of pedigree of the teams they play for will be Koja Samoa and then Partey, who unfortunately, perhaps because of the positioning and other things, has had a forgettable tournament. Never mind who scored a goal in that 2-0 win over Guinea-Bissau. So this was a team under construction. Anybody who's followed teams knows that you build a team, and then they peak, and then the team starts a decline. And what we've had is we've had our decline. We're lucky to get to the semi-final stage.
Are you saying we've had a peak before this decline?
We had our peak a long time ago.
When? I'm 36 years. In my time, I've never remembered any time there was any peak like that.
I mean,
I mean, seriously, I mean, what, the qualification to the World Cup in 2009, 2006?
2006 was a peak for us.
When we went to the World Cup, was that a peak?
It was. You would have to put aside our poor performance in that Nations Cup. We had up to 5 key players who were injured. And as the players themselves have told me, because I've spoken to a lot of them as part of the documentary, they keep saying that then they were complacent because they had qualified for the World Cup. Then there was the element of fatigue because there had been a quite grueling World Cup campaign. And so forget about Egypt. There was a peak in 2006. Fantastic. We added on to that team.
Wasn't the peak rather in South Africa?
And you would measure that because we got to the quarterfinals.
Yes.
But again, it was a team under construction, but whose construction had been forced by the coach. The difference being that at the time, the coach had a clear identity how he wanted to play, and it wasn't based on really having star players. It was based on organization. So there was a clear way of playing. This was a famous one-goal project where we scored just 4 goals and we got to the Nations Cup final in 2010. That team was supposed to have peaked at Brazil, but surrounding circumstances prevented that team from really hitting its peak. And after Brazil, things just went awry. And that's where we have come from. The last 5 years, where they fell out with the fans, we had administrative issues, we had a team that we just didn't know how to construct. And it is in that we messed up. So when this coach was appointed, he decided, well, he was going to start all over again because his philosophy being that it doesn't matter who you pick. But then he was also interested in bringing through young players. He brings them through. We start preparations. It's very clear. Ghana is not one of the favorites. We are not top 5 in Africa. We don't have the strongest teams. Even our preparatory matches shows that. But then you have 2 things happening. And I call this the arrogance of Ghanaians who feel that because they've been in the semi-final 6 previous occasions, they should walk into every tournament and roll over every team that they meet, big or small, and get to the latter stages. Then the presidential patronage comes in. Then the promises come in, and suddenly people think, once we are paying you everything. Unfortunately, when the players were asked what they thought will motivate them to win, they didn't stray far from money.
Yeah. It was money.
But this is a country who had decided at a point that never again, that we have tried the money approach and realized it brought problems. Yeah. So the emphasis should not be money. Money should be complementary. But then we decided to throw away every single thing, and we went into this tournament. So for me, it was a mismatch between the reality on the ground and the expectations of the people and the expectations of the government, which has made this even hurt more than it should. But any realistic person would have known that this
is not going to happen. You touched on, I guess, a lot of points that led to our terrible performance. One is the structural challenges with finding the right crop of players, but also grooming them and getting them to a position where they can compete, and whether we have the structures in place to produce that, do have that production line that delivers and produces the kind of players. And the second is money. We'll talk about that. Then we've talked about political patronage, which always seems to be a problem. We talk about our own expectations as a people. But Jerome, I want to start with that structural underlying problem, which is that every country and every team that we support, your ability to raise players from the youngest ages and keep an eye on them until they mature and feed them in. So there's never a time where you can say that you have a shortfall in quality players. A team's ability, or a country's or a club's ability to do that. Barcelona, classic example. I mean, it's been ages since I remember Barcelona go through this period of non-performance, totally, like they fall off because they have a production line that clearly doesn't. You can bring any coach in the world, put him in Barcelona, he will play the same. Yes. Because there's a system there. I think, isn't that why we are where we are? That we haven't had that since the 2006 production line.
Absolutely. I mean, the local game as we have now is dead. It is dead because clubs are run poorly. It is dead because the FA doesn't seem to have a plan as to how we will nurture players from the grassroots, like you were saying. And once we decide to leave the local scene and go out there and fish out players, some of who in previous years were not even really Ghanaians. I mean, maybe half of their parents are Ghanaians and will sit, talk, and then decide that, oh, once maybe a father or a mother is a Ghanaian, let's bring them. The problem as we have had was just because there was no plan to develop the game from the grassroots. We picked players who, some of the players we picked, like Agogo, was almost coming to the end of his career. Yeah. And once you do that, you are unable to develop players from here.
Yeah.
And I'll give you the South African example. Sometimes when I talk about it, people get offended that I like drawing examples from there. But as we have them now, all their players, majority of them are from the PSL.
Yeah.
Because
it's invested in the local game.
And that is what
the most attractive.
That is what we have not
league
done
in Africa.
We are not doing that because we think we can always get players outside Ghana to form the national team. And even when we are able to build the younger national teams like the under 17, under 20, the Meteors, we still will sideline them when we are supposed to be graduating them stage by stage. We will sideline them and go for players who really are not even from here.
You raise a very important point.
For example, if you take the under 20 team of 2009,
yeah,
we have some of them in these current Black Stars.
How many?
Dede and his brother.
Okay, yes, yeah.
They are,
We just have two.
yes,
Two.
but I'm saying that it goes.
But that's alarming.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the squad that won the cup.
Because actually the bare fact is that in 10 short years, the careers have stalled. What you would have ideally seen is that over a 10-year period, there should have been the time where the 2000
We're about to reap,
but
peak.
it is
What
also
you've seen, you have
because
just two of them left
it
in
is
the
also
national
because
team,
of
so
the kind of
careers have
ages
stalled.
they used to play, which we are not even ready. I mean,
to admit.
Yeah. Dede and Jordan will be here because they use the
They
right
were
age.
real ages, yeah.
And quite apart from that, they have also been consistent in the last few years. The problem as we have now is that we are not ready to come back to the basics and start from there. And once we are not ready, we'll always try and cut corners. But when we get to the top,
They will be exposed.
Yes, reality will dawn and we'll be exposed.
Yeah, I mean, you've touched on a very important point, and I mentioned that because you said under 17.
Yeah.
And you made it mention under 17. I'm like, when I was growing up, in fact, before I talk about Black Stars, that's what I remember.
All of us.
Audu Isaka and co, because that is where we saw the future of Ghana football. When was the last time under 17 played in
This was 2 years ago when we qualified for the World Cup in India.
And what happened?
We got knocked out in the quarter-final stage.
That never happened to a Black Stars under
And
17.
even before then, we had failed like 2 or 3 times
to qualify. For a Ghana under 17.
What you get in the past with the success of a junior team was a rallying point and a core group to build your team around. But the culture we developed was a culture of all in, win or nothing. If a team doesn't win or go very far in a global tournament, then we just jettison them. And then we don't build on them. And so the generations that fell through the cracks, although they were really good players and didn't go very far in under 17 or under 20, suddenly we had no use for them. And whenever a coach was appointed for the next generation, he essentially never went back to the core players or used them. So junior teams have provided us with that core. But when you look at the history in the last few years, we've missed that opportunity, including this year, where we could have qualified for the FIFA Under-20 World Championships. Our team was knocked out in the first round. Other teams have built on that.
Yeah, Mali.
You check Mali, you check Guinea, you check Nigeria. The other thing that's been missing from our football since 2004 is Olympic qualification.
Yeah.
Because then what you get is that the Olympic team is the closest you have to your national team.
Yeah.
When we decided in 2002 to start rebuilding with Ben Kofi and appointed Osam Dudu to take a team to the 2002 Nations Cup, what they did was to pick up some of the boys from the 2001 Under-20 team and then push them into the national team. Then you have the setback, and that's, I'm sure we'll talk about what you do with your coach's appointment because it's critical to that development. When we brought back Bukaziza, what he does then is to shove aside all the young players and bring back old players, including Eddie Ansah at the time, who was a goalkeeper's trainer, to become a coach, to become a player. Yeah. So we have the setback. But then we recover because Mariano Barreto comes and we go to the 2004 Olympic Games with Stephen Appiah, Asamoah Gyan, Bafo Gyan, and other people. So that then becomes the core team that you build on for your 2006 World Cup team. And then in 2009, we had that opportunity with that Under-20 team as well. But between then and now, we haven't really had successful teams. In 2013, we had another young group of players. The only real survivor from that 2013 team that won the bronze medal is a goalkeeper, Richard Ofori. I'm sure you're familiar with the Clifford Abuaji generation and other such people. And you'd ask, what happened to them? So I think it comes back to having a plan.
Yes.
We don't have a
When
plan.
you don't have a plan, you are essentially groping in the dark. And I think when you are groping in the dark, you should know when it is that you are at the crossroads and your team is not as strong, and you should measure the expectations and know what to do. Unfortunately, the last 2 years have not been very usual because of the expose and then the subsequent removal of the FA executive. So in that uncertainty, nothing really has been put together.
See, Evans, we would have to really look at what it is that others are doing that are getting them results, and be courageous enough to admit that not until we go that path, we will not also be able to achieve the results.
Which path is that?
That path is coming back to the basics. I remember when Ben Kofi started it in 2005. All of us were mocking him. We were mocking him that he was trying to force small boys, supposedly, into the National Under-17 team. And indeed, we didn't qualify. Probably because, I mean, the team was too young. They were not as experienced as their competitors were. But that was the beginning of the reality that we need to start from the basics. And I mean, it is difficult to even talk about the current situation of the Black Stars without linking it to how our football has been run in the last 10 or so years. And that is why I have, for instance, been saying that for us to get back on track, right after this competition, right after the NC and whoever went there to Egypt comes back, we would have to accept that our football is dead.
Okay.
Let us accept that reality and begin to think how we can revive it.
You know, when you said that, my production team and I were thinking about how to frame the topic, and somebody said, oh, Ghanaian football is dead. And I'm like, no, that people will bash us if you say that. But you said it without hesitation.
Yes, because all of us.
But serious, is Ghana football dead?
Oh, it's dead. Evans, as we speak, we have not had a competitive league football in the last 1 year. What we had was a makeshift competition that has had its own controversies. As we speak, the Women's League, I mean, I don't even want to talk about it, because as we saw, the level of competition wasn't even the best. We saw the Black Queens play in Accra here, and you could tell that how the South Africans were playing, how the Nigerians were playing, even though they went to the world level, and we could see that they were not even good. But back home, it was difficult beating these teams. What it means is that they may not be the best when they go to the world, but on the African level, the standard we have is so low that we cannot even compete with them.
Yeah.
And these are realities that we will have to accept and see how we can get back on track. And I'm saying that we need to pull everything down. What we have there, as we are
I thought we pulled everything down with the dissolution of the GFA.
I think the
Look,
question...
the NC, for example, in my opinion, are touching on the surfaces of our problems.
Yeah.
And they will not fix it. They need to be told that the problem they are dealing with, they are just touching on the surface. We need to break the whole thing, go deep down, and uproot it.
I think, you know, I think that is a very strong description.
Is Ghana football dead? No. It's not.
It is.
I mean, it's on
our football lacks sponsorship.
It's on life support, but it's
no. But if you break it down into practical specificities, it's dead, is it not?
Yeah,
we don't have an FA. Yeah. We have a normalization committee. We don't have a local league. We don't have a coast league. We don't have all the structures you need to be competitive in the national football.
They are missing.
We don't have it. So where is it?
So again, this is why I say it's dead. It's not dead, because this is a transient period, and I can't wait for them to get a substantive FA management and then hand over to them. It's not dead because we know what the solutions are, and over time, what we've realized is that we are not able to make holistic interventions. We are too blinkered, you know, like horses on a racetrack, just looking at the finish line. There's that, and the fact that being blinkered then means that you don't look at the other things that have an effect or that feed into your success. And so we know that glory in the Nations Cup or in the World Cup has always been a political staple. Right? It's used by politicians. So why then do we fall victim to the very same thing? I'll give you an example. Why was everybody in Egypt when what they are doing is reconstruction work? reconstructing our football. And so somebody has to be here undertaking that reconstruction. How different is that from what we've done in the past? When we accuse FA administrations of being Black Stars centered and all about the Black Stars, why did we need more than one management committee person in Dubai, for instance, when all the team did was to train and rest, train and rest?
Because
what were the responsibilities
get the bonuses
of all these
with the travel,
people?
etc.
When all the arrangements had already been made. You can't segment what you do and do them consecutively. You have to do everything concurrent. Yeah. So you have an eye. Over the weekend, I was in Kumasi for an under-13 competition. And I remember the technical director of the FA telling me that every year, these competitions channel players freely. Somebody sponsors this. Yeah. What we do not do is to then design how we graduate these players. And we have played it so often that if we had started, let's say, in even 2010, would have had a quality group of people ready to go through our junior teams. So what happens is that everybody is willing to play to the gallery and take that piece of the football that makes them popular, that makes them famous, that gives them political credits, which is exactly what we've done in this tournament, because I think we paid more attention to the glory than what was at stake. Now that things haven't worked out, I'm sure this is where the daggers will come up. And we'll hear things that we didn't hear, because all we ever do is to paper over the cracks.
Yeah, and then after that,
and then afterwards, things just go haywire. All hell breaks loose.
This time it will be difficult for them to come, and here I'm talking about the management team, the players, the coaches, all those people. It will be very difficult for them to come and tell us stories. I would take stories from journalists who were in camp, and because the very day I heard Joy FM play a voice of Kwesi Appiah saying that this is the best camp he has had, I said, Kwesi, your words will come back to hurt you. And I said this.
And this was after the captaincy row, etc., etc.
And I said this not knowing anything in camp, but just looking at the history, where there have been issues in camp all the time. Like he said, we paper them, and then right after our exit from the competition, all those issues come back. We don't even solve them. And here is the case. Maybe it might not be appropriate for me to go in, but the stories have started coming out.
Such as?
Players bringing girlfriends to camp to have sex, to the extent that there are claims that it affected some of the players and their performance. And these are serious issues.
But that happens in autonomy.
No,
the wax.
Yes, I don't have a problem with a footballer having sex before a match.
Yes. You should have.
No, because I mean,
is there science to suggest that if you do that, it affects your the performance on the pitch?
I can't tell, but okay. I mean, from what I know, if I were a footballer, I would have sex before a match, and it will not affect my strength because of how maybe my physiology.
But you're saying that indiscipline.
Yes, the point is about having camp rules that clearly state that you cannot do this, yet you do it.
The question is, who enforces the rules?
I mean, the enforcement is important, but I'm saying that collectively, if the person who is supposed to enforce the rule doesn't enforce it, and the person who is supposed to also obey the rule doesn't obey it, collectively, we are all to be blamed. And I'm saying that I do not expect such stories from the team, especially when we have been told that everything was okay in camp. Yeah. And these
that was the coach being naive. Let me explain. This was the coach being naive. And you see, and it's not just him. I've heard others also say this, and this is purely based on the body language of the players, the way they related to each other. Remember, in the build-up, the worst fear was that this Asamoah factor was going to cause splits and divisions. Now, once that didn't materialize, as far as they were concerned, this was the best camp ever. 5-star hotel, every payment has been made. And now we have cause to suspect that we paid to the extent that we overpaid, even for training matches.
Yes.
We paid who? The facilities?
Yes. Even to the extent that it appears that we even paid them for playing South Africa and Namibia on their training grounds.
Friendlies?
Yes.
And even in Egypt.
This was the extent to which we were willing to bend over. So once, and this is all political talk, because once, look, the whole Egypt campaign was a circus. Circus with music and everything, and everybody else telling us everything is okay. Primarily built on money. That when you give the players money, and we didn't learn from experience. So the talk about harmony in camp was based primarily on the fact that we had created the right living conditions for the players,
So we made them comfortable.
Comfortable, and we gave them money.
And we thought that
that
should get them to.
And we felt that wasn't
die on the pitch.
But then there were signs. I mean, after our training matches, those who watched said, okay, there were a few things that needed to be done before the tournament. Tell me, apart from the Cameroon game, which of the games we played in this competition that we really excelled in? None. And people spoke about how we labored in first halves and how we struggled to win matches. Unfortunately for us as well, we didn't exactly put away most of our chances, which for me is one of the immediate concerns. And we knew the day is coming because traditionally we've struggled to put away chances. And your best striker until now wasn't going to play. You have to give credit to Jordan. He rose to the occasion in many ways.
He had a fantastic chance yesterday.
But there are no shortcuts to winning this tournament. And if there were shortcuts, we would have won it within the 37 years period.
Yes.
There are no shortcuts. This was a political agenda. This was a political project. With the shortcuts, we suspended everything in the book. Everything we had said we won't do.
We did.
It's exactly what we did. But you don't expect, because it's 1 over 90 minutes or 120 minutes or penalty shootout on the field of play. And we repeated several of those mistakes.
Yes.
For example, I have had a problem with the way we've monetized everything around.
Yeah, just the money I was going to talk about. Because it's clearly, and you made the point, and it's instructive. That was it last year, before the end of the year when we met the president at Jubilee House. A question was asked him, what is he doing to implement the Jamafe report?
Yeah.
And he said, honestly, quite honestly, and I applaud him for that he's never thought about it. In fact, he asked around what Jamafe report is and said it never came to his mind. But that is the report that was supposed to tell us never again and give us a clear roadmap to fixing the problems. Yeah. The incumbent government says, we haven't had it, we haven't touched it. And here they go, repeating all the things that my report says don't do because they haven't we haven't done it.
The players were paid in cash in Dubai.
In dollars, yes, absolutely.
It's a reflection of how we have lived as a country. Things happen, committees are set up, they do a fine job, make recommendations, we pack the books, whatever they recommend, and put it somewhere. That is how we have lived. And that is why, for instance, we will forget the fact that Kwesi Appiah said in Brazil that money ruined us. The Daily Graphic quoted him as saying that money destroyed us. 5 years on, money is still a problem in the Black Stars.
Yeah.
And it's just because we are not ready to do what we know to be the right thing.
And this was the most astonishing thing. Even the government that set up the Jamafe report, years after the Jamafe report, still flew money in one of the tournaments. Which one was that?
The flew money. Yeah, it flew money in 2014. It was a result of a 2014 saga that we set up a committee.
But subsequent to that,
there was
another tournament.
There was a match, I think a qualifier.
Yeah, that we
Rwanda.
We had to send money. It became a big issue.
You know, politics and football are bedfellows.
Yeah. We'll talk about the politics because I think it's
and that's where the money comes in. Since the Black Stars became monetized, everybody thought that there was going to be a sea change after 2014. Yeah. That we've learned our lessons. Players come. There were even suggestions that let players sign, let them subscribe to a code of conduct, which brings in the rumors you are talking about. A code of conduct that says that you can only do this. These are the rules in camp. Let players commit to a certain way of living once they are in the national team fold. I think one of the things that came up was, let's have a clear criteria how we select players. All that ceased. Coaches select players, they are not accountable to anybody. There was a time when we used to organize press conference, coach defends his list and announces that I've selected these players because of A, B, C, D. We decided that was too much problems. Jerome and his colleagues will come and ask unnecessary questions. So let's just Nicodemously drop a list and then proceed with it, because we will do whatever we want to do. And so this, once you move away, it's a betrayal of the very people who support the national team, because we have seen the depths to which money could get us. So this whole thing was ill-conceived. I think even the coach, and I'll have some sympathy on him, I think he was set up to fail.
Who set him up to fail?
I think he was set up to fail. The circumstances of his appointment, the way he went about the selection, you could tell that this was an attempt to rebuild. And the team was not ready for the targets that were set for it. But circumstances had political influence. There were political goals. And so he needed to play along. If I were him, I would have come out along to say that, look, we just want to go and do well. And that I don't think the team based on where we are in the development of the team, are capable of winning. But he also played along, so he has to dance to the music.
Evans, bottom line is we are not learning. Because
Clearly.
Yes, because you see, there are very good examples out there which we can copy.
But that is the Ghana problem. It's not like it's not the football problem. In every aspect of our lives as a nation, we don't learn.
I keep saying that in Brazil, Germany won the World Cup. Are we sure that the Germans were paid as much as we did to our players, even after winning the cup? Don't we know how national teams are managed such that at competitions like this, how are South African players going to be paid? That we can also incorporate into our system, even if it won't work. How can we copy what they are doing to situate it to our life and see how best we can also do things? We are simply not learning, just repeating the very things that made us fail in the past. And look, nothing is going to happen until we accept the reality that the way we have run football in Ghana is not the best. We need to come back, and I will say this to the NC. It's a very easy job they have. They have made it difficult because they do not want to consult the right people. There are people in this country who know what is right, who know what is wrong with our football, and can show us the way to doing the right things. And we must be able to whip people in line.
Who does the whipping?
No, that is why there is leadership. I say that leadership is everything. And leadership is everything because you are the one cutting the path. You should be able to drive people along that path. That is how some other countries were able to develop. We keep saying that some years back, Malaysia was just almost like Ghana and all those stories. How did it happen that today we cannot compare ourselves to them? Because someone decided that whether you like it or not, this is the path you follow. And we must do the same with our football. Look, in our local game, we have Premier League team inspectors who go around league centers to inspect venues and all that. They come back with reports and will tell you that everything was okay. League competition gets underway, and you go to a center and you ask yourself.
So where did they get the reports from?
Oh, I mean, they go there. But I'm saying that we have standards.
Okay.
The cloud licensing book, or whatever they call it,
that's a set of rules.
Sets out what we should be doing. And the difficulty is we'll take the book to a center and see what we can take out so that this brother can have the opportunity to play in the league. And I'm saying that if we are not going to stop those things, it will be very difficult to get the right things done.
So you're saying
the
way to start this is to go back to the grassroots?
Yes.
Grassroots football is where you produce your talent.
It is very, very important.
And another thing that struck me, I think we are not even exporting enough players now.
Because the quality is not good enough to...
I actually think we are exporting a lot of players. The question is, where are we exporting them to?
That is the point.
Because, I mean, things are so bad locally. Clubs are really struggling, even before the issues happen that stop the league from being run. To the extent that players will accept any offer and go anywhere. I'll give you a typical example. When did they play the WAFU competition?
2017.
And people started touting those players as the future of the Black Stars, players who could potentially go to the Black Stars. They were Hartlepool players, or Kumasi Asante Kotoko players. Tell me, where are all those players?
They'll go.
Disappear.
They've accepted offers, but not to top leagues. Offers that would just give them something to be able to feed themselves and their family. So people are playing all sorts of obscure corners. Very few of these players will be able to wriggle their way through and get into top teams. And so then they are lost forever. These days, it's hard to categorize somebody as a local player. Because today he's a local player.
Tomorrow he's
going
for some
Evans
league.
Comes along, he says, look, there's a guy I know in Mauritania who has a team, and he says,
let's go and play for them, and then they'll hop on the plane and go.
Anywhere but Ghana. But then it goes back to the point. Where's the plan?
Yeah, there's no plan. And we're going to take a break. When we return, the point about politics, we'll look at it. But also the coach. Some have already said on the back of this we should sack him. But is that the solution? We've sacked him before, remember? And we brought him back. And so clearly it wasn't the solution. It isn't the coach as Barcelona has taught us. It's not the coach. It's about having the structures and the blueprint. If you do have that, anybody you put there will just have to fit into the mold you have. Do we have the mold? We don't. We'll talk about how politics plays a role in this. And imagine, and let's take a leaf from the book of the women's national team for the United States. The captain said if they win and they return to the U.S., she will not visit the White House. No Black Stars player can say that because there's so much politics with the national team. We'll try and deal with that when we return and talk about the coaching problem as well. Stay with us. So a few truths we've learned tonight that in camp already, rules were broken. Suggestions of monies being paid to players, overpaying and sometimes being disrespecting camp rules, having sex before games, etc. But it's just a story of the Black Stars over the last 37 years, and nothing has changed. It appears to be getting worse. Even after Jammeh First report committee was formed, people went there and shed tears. And you thought, well, this is going to be the turning point. It hasn't been the turning point. And I shudder to think whether the next 2 years we'll be back on the same desk talking about the same problems going into another tournament if we qualify. Let's talk about politics, because this, I think, one of the biggest problems we have in this country with football is the politics. And I think everything else we've said tonight is because of the politics. The cash, the failure to structure the system properly, because football is run in Ghana by the politicians and not the football people. True or false?
True. It's run by the politicians. Yeah. They control the funds. Black Stars budgets normally, yes, spent by the FA, but actually the approvals and everything come straight from the seat of government. Because when the Black Stars go to play in any tournament, you are prosecuting a national agenda, but it's also very much a political agenda. Because over the last 37 years, every single government, every single head of state has known that if they win that elusive trophy, I mean, it transforms it's political capital, political currency for them. And everybody has tried to do that. And the appointees know that as well. And they have pursued this. In this case, and it's not trying to be overly critical of the minister, but I felt this minister has often always missed the opportunity to articulate policy, to articulate a clear plan for this ministry. Other sports, as for the other sports, I'll say they are dead. We'll say we want to go to 2020 Olympics, all that, but clearly they are clueless. Yeah. There's no plan. I've seen him speak a number of occasions, and he never articulates policy, he never articulates a plan. He would rather rouse the people and make political promises. Yeah. And I've seen also in this last few years, colleagues split along the lines of who is pro-minister and who is anti-minister. Any word of criticism is seen as anti-minister. With all due respect, I think the president must have been misinformed, both at the minister level and at the normalization committee level. They should have shown him the bare realities that, look, certain winning as a standard, as a benchmark for this team, will be a step too far. This team can do well. Maybe if they do well, they can build on it for the next tournament. And then we can give the coach ample opportunity. But this tournament is 50-50. I think people planned, and the information given to the president must have been that, getting to the semi-final is a given. So really the key thing is how you get to the final and win it this time. Other than that, I don't see how. And because the president's statements would have been based on information that was given to him, including the charge he gave them when he had the final dinner, and then when he went to Egypt to speak to the players as well. It's okay to dream. I mean, a champion suspended the whole league to prepare a team for 1 year. For those who didn't know, within that 1 year period, the team was shuttling between Brazil and here and Romania, just to prepare a team for one single tournament that they won. This team did not have that luxury. They came together to come for just a few weeks before, and we knew what the faults are. So the political glory overshadowed all this, and nobody was willing to admit that. And it's because of the same political direction that made us, because now I think when the minister and his team are finally here, it'll be difficult for anybody to, again, communicate to us how much was spent. Yeah, it's going to be difficult because all the rules were broken and the shortcuts were taken. So that disconnect, if we continue to lead our football development and indeed our sports development, not based on policy and planning, but based on political capital, I'm sorry, we'll still be in the doldrums.
You see that ever changing?
No, I mean not with the way we are doing our things.
there's something the minister said the day the team visited the presidency, and I was so disappointed. He was making references to the under-20, World Cup triumph in Egypt.
2009, 10 years ago.
And the fact that we're in that city, those stories.
It was all superstition and coincidence.
Yeah, because some ignoramus on radio had said the same, and minister had heard it, and was repeating it to the president.
Those stories were not scientific. Scientific in the sense that, someone would sit down.
And then we framed the slogan, the year of return, because somehow...
other teams will sit down, look at the strength of their players, and make projections. Like he was saying, with this strength, we are not likely to win the competition, but maybe a quarter or semi-final appearance.
It's realistic.
It's realistic. Look at what Madagascar is doing. I saw their president jumping at the last penalty. He almost fell. It is because they've never reached this point before. They've never qualified before. So beating DRC and making it to the quarterfinal is a big achievement. But in Ghana, we cannot celebrate that because we've been to 6 semi-finals, 2 finals. The minister was talking about how he feels that the trophy is coming to Ghana because the under-20 team did it in Egypt.
Political talk.
And he believes that it can be done this
Superstitious
time.
talk.
Based on what?
Tainted with politics.
Look, I believe there is superstition in football, but you need to do the practical things. You need to get a good coach. You need to get a good team in place.
So what do we need to do now? I think the problems we know. Read the Jamaica report. You find it. We've talked about them here. What do we need to start doing today? First, coach. Should we sack the coach?
If I were the FA president, I will consider that.
Okay. So we don't have an FA president.
Even though Kwesi is my friend.
So who is going to sack the coach? Normalization committee?
Yeah. They are now running football now. Okay. But I think we shouldn't even do those things.
The problem is who appointed him.
At the end of the day, I think Kwesi might have to leave. But then the NC should just focus on what FIFA asked them to do.
Which is?
Run the day-to-day affairs of the FA.
Review the statutes. Organize
election. And they should leave the scene to a substantive FA who must have a plan as to how Ghana football should be run. Otherwise, we are
an unelected body is always hard to hold to accountability.
Yes.
Do we sack the coach?
I don't think we should sack him. I think he should resign.
Okay, but
I think Kwesi
bottom line, you don't want him there.
Yeah, I've seen him beg the Ghana public and apologize in 2013, and I think then he was treated with kid gloves because just the year before, Stevanovic had been literally driven away for achieving the same result. I think he should resign, but I also think we don't have much time before we commence another World Cup qualification in October. So we need to decide now. Do we have the patience for medium to long-term planning? And so we give ourselves, we say, because look, there are a lot of positives from this team. We've seen the young players who have blossomed in this tournament, who have given us a glimpse of what could be. We've seen Kwabena Owusu, we've seen Samuel Owusu. Baba found his confidence back again. We've seen Nuhu deliver masterful performances in centre back. We should have already seen that on a number of occasions. If you want to take these and build on it, you don't need to put them under immense pressure by saying these are the immediate targets, qualify for the World Cup and all that. So if you're going to sack this coach, or if he's going to resign, I'm literally appealing to Kwesi that it is in his interest. So he doesn't deserve the embarrassment that will come with a post-mortem. He's better off resigning honorably. The next question then becomes, how much money do you have to get a new coach?
Yeah.
Because Kwesi's appointment was non-competitive, in my view. And the going price may be upwards of 100,000.
Yeah. A month?
USD, yes.
How much are you paying Kwesi? 30,000?
Yeah, 35.
How much are you willing to pay for a coach and what kind of coach? And so if you decide, for instance, that you're bringing in somebody like maybe Efe Renard or somebody with a developmental background to put together your team, wield them. Because the other thing you didn't get with Kwesi is a clear identity.
Yeah.
So he says, we met Cameroon, he suddenly decided, let's sit back.
But here's the thing though. Is the coach, should we allow the coach to dictate how we play, or the blueprint should then dictate who we get as a coach to fit into that.
That is where it must start from.
No, but you see, that's where the challenge is. I was speaking to Oti over the weekend. We had an extensive conversation over this. He says they have started a consultative process. People talk about that growth. I don't believe there's a style of play that exists because styles of play tend to evolve, and you are realistic.
I'm not even talking about styles of play. I mean, I'm talking about how should we approach this?
It has to be ready before the coach
first.
comes in.
Exactly.
The coach will slot into that blueprint.
Yeah.
And I think the focal point should be 2020.
And that is why the NC must...
And there's
2020
Olympic Games.
Okay.
Tanko is already the coach of the under-23 team. He would be the bridge of continuity.
Yeah.
If he stays at under-23 coach, he'll bring in some of these young Black Star players into the 2020 team. There'll be just 3 African countries. Let's make that a target. We have a World Cup qualification to start playing in October. I have said I don't think this team was a failure. It was just a victim of the expectations that we set for the team because they weren't ready. And so you do some pruning. When the season starts, there are people who will not be playing top level football, including the captain who is still not sure where he'll be playing or what level he'll be playing. You start the rebuilding process, then you get your coach. It's very critical that we get a coach who knows what it is, brings a clear identity to how we want to play, and then we start again.
Okay.
And then we reduce our expectations. And we stop all the political
I would love to have the NC execute their mandate and leave the scene for these things to
quickly,
be done by a
so that we
substantive
could.
effort.
no extension.
Yes.
There should be no extension.
Yeah.
How quickly do you want that to happen? Because they didn't have any.
I think by September they should be able to.
By September we
finish
should
up,
have
yeah.
an election. We should have a new FA executive. If you are going to start afresh, start with a new administration with a clear plan.
Yes.
Elected by the Football Congress, and so can be held accountable.
Sure.
Anyway,
Clear.
Listen.
And the resignations mustn't stop with the coach.
Everybody else.
But then we know he will never resign.
There's a lot we need to do to bring back the love. As you've heard already, this football is dead. There's a disagreement, but it's not too much of a disagreement. It's dying and it's dead. Very close. What we need to do, I think you've heard it already, and there'll be many things said after this defeat. Whether we come to implement it is a whole different conversation. But bet you, we'll return to another tournament. We'll see where the lessons were learned. Enjoy the rest of your evening.